Unmuted. Thank you so much, and welcome everybody to our presentation. And particularly thank you those of you coming in from Riyadh and Cairo. And I want to thank those of you coming in from the moon, particularly. That's our time zone difference is quite large. I know it's going to get better, folks, so don't worry. Okay, so I should mention that Louise and I are a truly great team. We actually started working together in the area of games for learning back in 2003, actually. So Louise, in 2 more years, we'll celebrate our 20th anniversary as colleagues working together and friends. So this is wonderful. So let's get into this. Today's topics, we're going to discuss social connectedness a little bit because social connectedness is the theme of WP4 and in particular, WP 4.2 is looking at digital games and social connectedness. We're going to I'll talk a little bit about the social benefits of digital games for older adults and then give a variety of examples, quite a wide variety of examples of the research and development that we've done in our project. Louise will take over and demonstrate one game, and we'll conclude and have a robust and exciting, we hope, question period. So again, welcome everybody. Here we go. So you could see, and we've talked about this a lot, so I'll just do one slide on this about the major demographic shift. And people have like to call this the silver tsunami, but I don't like that term. A tsunami is not too positive, so I call it the golden wave. And here it is. And because we have such a golden wave of seniors, quality of life has become a major issue for older adults in our society. And we have more and more attention being paid to this. In fact, one aspect of quality of life is social connectedness. So let's start by saying, okay, what is social isolation, which is the opposite, which is a deprivation of social connections, right? An inadequate quality and quantity of social relationships with other people at different levels, the individual level, the group, and the community. And the subjective experience of isolation generally can be experienced as loneliness and a persistent state that you're unable to approach others when you need to find comfort, to have somebody to listen to you, to seek advice, to engage either physically or emotionally with other people. In fact, some people have compared it to being like at the bottom of a well. You're just all alone and nobody can hear you and you're kind of trapped. So it's a situation where others are unaware of how distressed you are. So let's look at the positive side then. What is social connectedness? And that's defined namely by the frequency of contact with others, personal relationships, and engagement in the community. In other words, people have meaningful relationships and bonds with those around them, including their peers, their families, and their communities. So why is this important? Because we know from hundreds and hundreds, possibly even thousands of research studies that the impact of social participation on health is great. Research has shown many health benefits for older adults. For example, enhanced quality of life, longer survival, lower morbidity, better self-rated health, and better self-rated health. Sorry, folks. Okay, the decreased risk of disability and functional and mobility problems and depression, generalized anxiety, even cognitive decline and dementia has been reduced through social participation. So if we look at the associations of social isolation, in fact, it's associated with greater risk of cognitive decline and depression and sickness, disability, premature death. So there are dangers of seniors living alone if they're sticking by themselves and having no social participation. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the purpose of 4.2, WP 4.2 and Age Well is to examine the use of digital games to enhance seniors' social connectedness. When we talk about digital games, we mean games that are played face-to-face or online. In other words, you could play on your own computer, but in a group with other people, on a computer or a handheld device or a video game machine. So we started this project way back by doing a major survey of older adults in Canada. I've talked about this in other presentations, and certainly you'll find it described in a number of our papers. So for now, I'm just going to hit the main point here, which is out of 1,200 seniors all across Canada, from the east to the west, we discovered when we asked people what the benefits are, that you'll notice mental exercise was by far the one that nearly everybody chose. Enjoyment, of course, but look at social interaction. Only 26% of respondents suggested that as a benefit. So here we are arguing and having argued for a while that social connectedness is very, very important, and we think that digital games can provide social benefits, and we have shown that already, as you'll see in some of our research in a few minutes, and yet very few people are playing the games socially. So there's a challenge for us. So here are the 5 games I'd like to talk about, and Louise will discuss the solitaire quiz one in much more detail. So Wii Bowling is a very, very nice game developed elsewhere that we did research on, and then the other 4 games are games that we've developed. So here's Wii Bowling. So we connected a research study looking at the socio-emotional benefits of Wii Bowling. And you can just Google very easily, go to YouTube, etc., and you can see demonstrations of that. So you see how the game works. We set a senior in front of a big screen, and they see the image on the left, and it's like a virtual bowling alley. And you can see on the right, this person is getting ready with the controller that you use with the Wii, and they swing it around like a bowling ball and basically bowl. So we took 14 seniors community centers and retirement homes and regular community centers in Greater Vancouver and asked people to create teams. And they recruited teams of 3 or 4 participants. And we ended up with 73 participants. And about almost a third of them were, in fact, 85 years old and older, which is really very heartening for us. And we held a Wii bowling tournament for 8 weeks. So in that tournament, basically, people bowled 2 lines of bowling every week, and their scores were recorded on a website, and this was a big tournament. People could see where they stood every week for 8 weeks. So what did we find at the end? That playing Wii Bowling on our social connectedness scale, it increased social connectedness from the beginning to the end and reduced loneliness. And the themes that emerged from the interviews and focus groups that we did at the end was that we had increased interactions with others because of the Wii, and not only because of interacting with your team members, because people sometimes were on teams with people they hadn't met before, but in fact what happened after the word got out is that many, many people from those centers would come out and watch their team bowl. So you had groups of people all centered around the bowlers and basically watching and talking to one another and getting to know one another, and a whole bunch of new friendships and were made during that session. And so we had an improved social connectedness from interviews. People commented on that. And what was interesting is that then people would talk about the tournament and how they did and how their team was doing with their family and friends. So this increased communication as well. So that was a very heartening and very successful experiment for us. Okay, then we got together with the Center for Digital Media, which is a center in Vancouver that's actually a collaboration between the 4 universities, UBC, Simon Fraser, Emily Carr University, and BC Institute of Technology. And they created a team for us of 5 players, gave us a whole semester on their capstone project, 4 days a week, with these 5 players, all with different skills. And we worked very closely together with them and created an escape room game. An escape room is a collaborative game in which several players are locked in a room. And the goal is to escape from the room. And in fact, this kind of forces collaboration, because to escape, players have to find clues and solve a series of puzzles, and they need to talk to one another while they're doing this. You will not escape by yourself out of the room. There has to be a lot of working together. So they offer a very good environment for meaningful interaction. And virtual escape games then are digital simulations of a real life escape game. So when we started this project, we looked on the internet and found already a few virtual escape rooms on the internet, but they're very, very poor and boring, and they don't work very, very well. We wanted to do something that was more true to life and more interesting. So what we did is we basically created a multi-platform escape room game called Tale of Tales. With the theme we chose for the game was Alice in Wonderland, because we all know about Alice in Wonderland, and seniors particularly are quite familiar with that game. And we checked that out with a number of seniors as well. So this is a 2-screen collaborative game that provides a social experience. So players enter a maze, and as they go through the maze, and if they make it through, they get into a room. And in that room, they solve a series of puzzles. And when they've done that, they then leave the room, they escape the room, and they go into another maze, same thing again, and hit a next room, and then a third maze, and a third room. And basically, the way that players communicate is using voice chat. In other words, they just talk to us normally over the internet to one another. Originally, when the Center for Digital Media team created this for us, we had to use Skype over the game because they didn't know how to do networking and things like that. So I got a developer person who happened to be in our PhD program by coincidence and was also a video game developer, and he put in the voice chat for us. So the way you play the game is one player is the navigator, and they have a bird's eye view of the maze, and they see where the other player is located, and they navigate with their voice the other player through the room. For example, go straight ahead, turn left here, turn left again. And the first player is right in the maze. They just see the walls. They don't see anything else. And you'll see a photo of that in a minute. And then once they get in the room, the players communicate with each other. They talk to one another, and they have to solve the puzzles. And the puzzles in the 3 rooms are different. They're all different rooms. Each person has a different view of the room, so they don't see the same thing. So each, therefore, could not solve the puzzle by themselves. They don't have enough information to do that. They have to talk to one another and tell each other what they see, etc. So there's a lot of talk, a lot of communication here. It's a great game. People really like it. So here's an example. Here's the maze. So the first player is in this maze. This is what they see. They can go left here, or they can go right. And here's what the other player sees. And they see the little arrow, they see this little pointer, and you can see where the player is in the maze. Here's one of the rooms, and here's a puzzle. So one person sees the clock and all of this, the other player seeing this, and they see times on here, and basically the trick is when you click on these rabbits and these characters, they light up in a different color, and you have to figure out the correct color to make them all light up in order, and then use one of these numbers, etc. So it's a kind of a little bit of a complex puzzle, but very doable, and our seniors were able to do it. And here's another room where you could see clues to a crossword puzzle. And here's another room with other clues. And eventually you have to figure out from the clues what the order of these 5 letters and what word these 5 letters will create. So again, a very interesting puzzle. Okay, so we did an evaluation on this, and we did basically field testing and showed that the players really enjoyed the literary theme. They liked the theme of Alice in Wonderland. They liked crossword puzzles. They liked the interaction with the partners. It's a very, very popular game. And it was found that older adults enjoyed this format of playing in pairs because interaction with their partner was really, really easy. So we were very, very happy with this game. There were some issues in this game, but so what did we do? One of my PhD students, I've been collaborating with a colleague, Dr. Eugene Loos, in the Netherlands, in Holland. And so we sent my grad student over there to work with his PhD student. So the 2 PhD students working together, they recruited 30 older adults in Holland between 65 and 84 years old, played the game, and we did a more comprehensive study. What we had done was to translate the whole game into Dutch. And what did we find? That players believe the game is appropriate for their age, and they would, pretty much all of them said they would play the game again with more themes and more puzzles if we could develop that. They liked the collaboration to achieve the shared goal in solving puzzles with their partner. They enjoyed that. But they gave us feedback that the speed of the game could be modified. The controllers, they didn't like the way they worked too much. The navigation, all of that should be modified for older adults. They still struggled a little bit with it. And they felt that more instructions and hints were needed, because sometimes when you got stuck in a room without a hint, you could just be there for a long time and it could frustrate them. So we have to simplify things a little bit. Okay, here's a game that you might recognize. In fact, we all do. It's bingo. So my other PhD student did a study with bingo. And this is a game that was developed in Quebec by Louise Sauvé's team years ago. And in those days, it wasn't meant to be played on a tablet. It was meant to be played on a computer screen, and we used a touch screen. And we did an experiment. We sat a bunch of players around the table to play together. the bingo game. So they were in a social environment, they could chat, etc. And this is a frame game. A frame game basically means that the frame or the template is bingo, and you could see there's the game, etc., etc. And when the number is called, which comes up here, so you can see G55, you have to click on G55 in this G row here, and when you do that, a question pops up. And when that question pops up, you have to answer the question to be able to fill that square. And then when you get 5 in a row, of course, you win, and there's points here, etc. So it's a point system. So why did we choose bingo? Because it's a popular game. Everybody knows bingo. It's uncomplicated. And you could see, just coming back for a second, that everything about Canada was the first game we had them play, and that was a warm-up game. That was basically questions about Canada, so they get used to using the interface, get used to playing the game and see how it worked. Then when we did the study, the topic of the questions that popped up was about nutrition and health. What we did is we translated the questions and the work that Louise and her team had done in French in Quebec, and we did this study in English. People used a touchscreen laptop, and we had pilot tested it, and the game had already been pilot tested in Quebec, both in French and in English. And here's an example. You click on G55, this pop-up question comes up. What is the meaning of the Remembrance Day poppy? This was for the practice part of the game. So the questions are either multiple choice, true or false, and the person who puts the questions into the template, which is really easy to do, chooses the difficulty level, and this is considered as an easy question. You can see with the 1 asterisk. So the number of points on that question would be fewer. So what did we find? We had 50 participants on that study. They were 60 years and above. They came from 6 residential homes and 2 community centers in Greater Vancouver. These were all healthy, both cognitively and physically, and able to use a personal computer. The results showed statistically significant improvements in social connectedness, in their knowledge about nutrition and health, and their attitude towards digital games improved greatly. They have a whole different impression of digital games. 3 themes from the coding of the interview transcripts were the social co-playing theme, how much they enjoyed that, the excitement of the gameplay, and that they made new friends. For example, here's a quote from one person: "You're meeting new people, and if you don't know them in person, perhaps there's a connection when you form it." So in this particular study, we found it was highly successful. People really enjoyed it, and there's great potential there. Okay, so then we decided to take a different approach, and Louise and her team have been working for a while and decided to develop 2 new tablet games in Quebec, namely Tic-Tac Quiz and Solitaire Quiz. And these also are frame games. And they're games that, again, for example, on the Tic-Tac Quiz, when you click on your square where you want to put your X, a question pops up. You have to answer the question properly to be able to put your X down there, or your O, whatever side you play on. It's a 4x4 tic-tac-toe game, and we've played this game on regular computers for years, and Louise has put it onto tablets with her team. Solitaire Quiz also is a new game, and same idea that after a certain number of cards, and you have to answer a question to be able to continue and draw a card. So at this point, you could see this is how you get into Solitaire Quiz. There's a home screen, you move into it, you choose whether you want to play 1 card or 3 cards, etc. Here's what the screen looks like. And at this point, I'm passing the presentation over to Louise. Louise, it's all yours. Vas-y, Louise.
Thank you, David. You close your sharing?
You can just, okay.
You close?
I think so, yeah. I stop share, okay, I stop share. Go ahead, Louise.
Is good?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, David. Now, I'd like to introduce an experience with solitaire quiz. Know that solitaire quiz is an one-player's game. We experimented with a group of 4 to 6 seniors in order to encourage social interaction. They work in teams, but each played their games individually. In terms of social interaction, 4 aspects were examined using an observation grid and a group interview. In addition, we also tested 2 aspects of the USER-friendliness game: navigation of the game environment, equipment for playing. Our sample of seniors had experimented the game during social activities organized by the association or in the residence's living room, in which computer equipment was made available to the participants. 42 participants completed the questionnaire and participated at the interview. The experiment took place during 8 meetings and 3 measurement instruments were used. In terms of content, more than 80% of the seniors interacted with each other when they did not know the answer to a question. At all the meetings, there was a great deal of mutual assistance among participants in this regard. As the respondents become more confident in the game, more mastery of the game, they got to better know each other. At each meeting, several people reported that they had made new friends among participants who had not been friends before. For player perception concerning the navigation in the game environment, all the items had positive outcome. For player perception concerning the equipment for playing, all the items had positive outcome. Several recommendations have been developed regarding these different aspects to ensure that educational games are well adapted to seniors. We refer you to the white paper we wrote with David on this subject, located on the AgeWell website. Finally, the vast majority of the participants like to play solitaire along with a quiz, and the players wish they could try a new quiz. All participants would recommend the game to the other. Conclusion: the social benefits of digital games can foster connectedness among players and a sense of belonging. They provide enjoyable interaction. They lessen feeling of isolation and help to cope with loneliness and depression. The game help build and expand social networks and social activities, both face-to-face and online. The games can offer a community of fun for older adults. The end of presentation. David.
By God, for a minute there, it suddenly all made sense. Thank you, Louise. So here's our contact information. As Louise and I are Professor Emeriti, and we're retiring Dr. Patrick Plante, who's taken Louise's place at TÉLUQ, Université de Québec, is the project lead now. Louise continues to work with him, and I'm marginally working with them. If you want to see much more detail, and I'd say much, much more detail about what we've talked about today and more theory, just look, either use this URL down below or go to the HWell website, as you can see here, hwellnc.ca, under publications, and you'll see the list of reports there, and ours is in that list. Thank you. I guess that formally concludes our presentation because we wanted to leave extra time for questions because we're more interested in your needs rather than just our message. So we're looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David and Louise. That was amazing. You're very on time, which is appreciated. So we do have one question, and I encourage folks to add more questions. Let's get a discussion going here with our presenters because we've got a wealth of time. And the first one is saying, thank you for your great presentation. Was the bowling tournament held online or face-to-face?
That bowling tournament was held in those 14 centers face-to-face, and that's how people met each other. And, you know, that's obviously quite important. I should mention there's a whole new area of research now, I guess, that is interesting, which is in terms of social connectedness in particular, and all the benefits of that. Do we see anywhere nearly the benefits that you'd get in face-to-face social interactions like we did in Wii Bowling? Would you get anywhere nearly those benefits through Zoom, for example, and doing it that way? Clearly it is a way to socially connect, and we all are learning to do it much, much better, including many older adults now. Although many older adults were using Skype for years with their grandchildren and families and all that. But as we see a big increase, I think you'll start seeing some studies that look at the benefits of sort of virtual social interaction.
Perfect. So we have, and for those of you who have joined us, we also, if there's any French-speaking folks on the call, feel free to ask your question in French. I will do my best to read it out in French if that comes our way. The next question is one that I had as well, and I think it's a good one because we shared one of the links for how to access these games, which is through that website and an app called chouette.cool. So we can share that again, but Jan is asking, how can we access these games or others? Because I do believe you've got some others as well.
Sure. Louise, comment est-ce que les gens peuvent avoir accès au jeu? Can you? Je peux traduire si tu veux aussi.
Just 1 minute. I just take a address with this. This tic-tac-toe and solitaire quiz to access with this this address web, and you choose the game, and after you choose the theme for the game.
The theme, yeah, okay. So you choose the game and you choose the theme, and one of the things that Louise's team is working on is basically not only a series of games on different topics for older adults and things, but their team is working on the interface for the tool that actually lets you create all your own games. And that way people in centers could play together. They can say, hey, with somebody, you know, our team is going to create a game on health, and, you know, our team is going to create a game on financial issues. Our team is going to create a game on end of life care, you know, whatever. So in fact, there's going to be a tool. The thing I want to mention, I think, if you don't mind, I'll take a minute, because I think this is really key for us, is we've been talking about social connectedness and Louise's games for social connectedness. But one of the things that's very, very important for older adults is to continue learning, as we know, and lifelong learning is a key element. But in fact, a lot of older adults, especially those without a university education, etc., they stop learning, really, other than perhaps watching television or something like that. So one of the benefits of these types of frame games is for learning. and for lifelong learning. And in fact, you'll see that in one of the earlier studies, we talked about how people actually learned about they improve their knowledge through playing the game. So if you can get learning happening in a fun way for older adults, then that we think has great benefits for lifelong learning. And I think that's one of the great benefits of the frame games. One of the things about the frame games that was really fascinating, I think, is that when we were doing this research with bingo and these other games with students in public schools, they played the game and they learned something with the games, but they certainly weren't very excited about the games, because you could see a lot of people say, as soon as you build learning into a game, you kill the game. I mean, and it's not a true video game for young people. I mean, some of them, it's too slow moving, etc., etc. So to some extent, frame games were not as popular with young people as the other games, but suddenly for older adults, these games are perfect. Older adults, they really love these games. They're slow moving. The themes are things they know about, and they're learning while they're playing. And so I think that this type of game is very, very well suited for seniors, like for older adults.
Great, thank you, David. So we've got questions rolling in, which is great to see. We have Elizabeth K asking, did any of these studies explore the benefits of the games for older adults who live with dementia?
That's a great question, and to be frank, we didn't look at that. I'm not sure. Alice, est-ce que vous avez fait des études avec les gens avec le démence ou non?
Oui, dans les personnes qu'on a expérimentées, on avait à peu près 7 à 8 personnes qui avaient ces problèmes-là. Mais on ne l'a pas nécessairement documenté, puisque c'était qu'une petite partie de la population.
So Alice, we didn't do very much, but Louise actually did kind of some informal studies as they're developing the games and testing them with 7 or 8 or 6 or 7, older adults. And est-ce que vous avez trouvé quelque chose ou non? C'était juste pour voir s'ils pouvaient jouer ou quoi?
C'était pour vérifier la convivialité du jeu avec eux, puis que si effectivement ils souhaitaient rejouer, et c'était la population qui voulait le plus jouer avec ces jeux-là, de tous ceux qui ont répondu.
So they were just testing the user-friendliness of the games and to see if older adults with dementia could actually play the games, and in fact they could. And in fact, this, she says, I know it's not much of a study. We're talking about 7 or so people, but they're the group that were most enthusiastic and wanted to play the game more, and really liked this game and wanted to play it. And I guess you could see it's not very complicated at all, just to kind of click on a few things and try to answer multiple choice questions or whatever. I should mention that the frame games have 2 purposes. Can have 2 purposes. A frame game can be used, number one, they can use for evaluation or checking your understanding. For example, let's say you've learned something on the internet yourself, or by reading a book, or going to a lecture or something. You can actually then, when you're playing the frame game afterwards, you can actually test whether or not you know the stuff, whether or not you've learned it. And in fact, what we often do is we give feedback about whether their answer is right or wrong in the question, but we don't give specific feedback. We just give knowledge of results, right or wrong. However, when you're actually using the game to learn something before you've actually studied it in some way, and they're trying to answer questions, if they get a wrong answer, they not only are told that it's wrong, but in fact they're actually told what the right answer is and why. In other words, they're given a few sentences or a paragraph so that they're actually learning as they go along. That way, if the question pops up again, because questions will pop up a number of times during the game, then they'll be able to answer it next time. So it's a way of learning as you're going along.
Great. So we have a question on whether you're able to tell if any of those new connections that were made while playing these games, are these connections lasting beyond the game period? And if you look at that.
Sure. We did go back after a few months later. And again, it wasn't formal. We should have done probably a formal study, but frankly, we only have limited resources, and students were already on to other studies and all of that. So, but basically what we found was that as we asked around informally, is that people who hadn't known each other at all before, they wouldn't even acknowledge themselves in the dining room or anything, suddenly would speak to one another. So at least there was some interaction going on it. They'd say hello, or they'd talk a bit and all of that, as opposed to just walking by each other. Suddenly they were kind of connected. I'd have to say the impression we got when we did those kind of, I wouldn't call them interviews, but asking questions around to see what was going on, was that they were, in many cases, they were fairly superficial, but still people felt that they knew more people in the center now, that they were more connected to people in the center. So there was that feeling of having a greater connection.
Great. So we have a question on, a couple of questions related to long-term care. So how do you see any or all of these games in long-term care facilities where connectedness and interactions seem quite limited in content? And a link, of course, to the more recent events given COVID and the long-term care concerns related to social isolation. You know, this person's wondering if games are being considered for individuals who live in those areas. So kind of similar questions.
Louise, est-ce que tu as compris la question? Maintenant, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire avec les jeux? Est-ce qu'on considère mettre les jeux dans les maisons d'aînés, des choses comme ça? Qu'est-ce qui va se passer dans le futur avec tout ça? Est-ce qu'on peut faire quelque chose avec les jeux?
Oui, parce que présentement, ils sont accessibles par chouette.com et on a des milliers d'aînés qui y jouent actuellement. Et c'est très simple, c'est gratuit, donc c'est très simple à y jouer. Alors, on voit qu'il y a un retour de la part des aînés qui ont déjà joué, puis qu'on a beaucoup de nouveaux aînés, puisqu'on en a plusieurs milliers là, qui y jouent actuellement.
Yeah, so Louise says, yes, there's absolutely no problem for seniors in various centers, long-term care facilities. There's no problem for them to play because the games are right there on Chouette, as you saw, chouette.com. They're accessible. They've already got, she says, basically thousands of seniors are playing the games already, and many of them are coming back again. So you could see they're coming because they're recording on the server and all that. So many of them are coming back again to play again, and they're becoming more regular. So there's great potential there. So the issue really is promoting, and the issue is, well, several things, I guess. There's the issue of the hardware and how you play, but as we see more and more seniors getting devices now where they, you know, where this is becoming kind of natural. And so as more and more seniors have devices and become more used to using their computers for different things and wanting to play the game. But also you need somebody, you know, to make anything happen. Typically it's almost like you need a leader of some sort. You need somebody who's driving it. So we would like to think or hope that the social coordinator or the person who looks after the activity coordinator in the centers, etc., could actually get familiar with this and promote the games a bit and get people playing. And a good way to do that is, in fact, sometimes on a large screen where people can come and actually watch as well. So anyways, that's what we think has to happen in the future.
Great. So we have a question and a comment, I think, from Ken, who's saying that he'll probably contact you to get perhaps this presentation in his local area, in the Tri-Cities area of Vancouver. And he's saying that he's trying to offer events and Zoom webinar events and information considering COVID. And just any suggestions, I guess, on how to cope during this current reality, given the social isolation that everyone is feeling, and perhaps more so if you're an older adult and you live alone and that kind of thing.
Wow, that's a great question too. And my God, if I could answer that question, I'd be the COVID expert here, but I'm not. So, but I guess if you'll permit me, from a fairly humble perspective, I'm going to make some suggestions. One suggestion I would have, which was an idea that a colleague of mine, Ron Bellino, in Toronto actually was doing, which was really great, was connecting people, say on Zoom, for virtual dinners. So for example, you say, okay, we're all coming on, for example, at 6 o'clock tonight, and or whatever your time, you know, if you're in the same, more or less same time zone, and you're going to sit down at the table with your meal and connect a group of you together, maybe, you know, 4 people or so, and then have dinner and have a chat. So it's as if you're sitting at the same table together. So you start simulating a social experience like that. And, you know, you show each other what you're having, what you've cooked, you know, you have something to talk about to get the conversation going, and then you talk about other things. And it's like a simulated dinner conversation. And that's a good start, you know, and then also you can then do things like, for example, play some of the games we've talked about, play some of Louise's games together, or for example, just play something else together, you know, like as an example, the party games that people play when they're face to face, why not play them on Zoom, right? So there's a lot of potential, but you know, the important thing for me, I think, being a senior as well, is that if I wanted to connect with other people, I'd like to do it in a way that's fun, you know, like and maybe to do that a few times so that you get to know people and you've established some rapport. And after that rapport is established, then somebody takes the lead and says, okay, what would we like to learn about? And then you build in the learning part of it. And you say, okay, next week I'm going to do a presentation or on, you know, end of life care, or on getting your financial affairs in order, or on how to do a will, or what, you know, whatever it is that people are interested in. So you start off with a rapport building, fun and things, and you meet more than once so that it doesn't become superficial, and you start making some friends online, or you do it with people that you know, like your friends, and you play. And then after that, perhaps you move it into learning together. Just some ideas I have.
Great, and yeah, Ron is actually on the webinar, so he says thanks for the plug.
I should mention that, Ron. I'm happy to do a plug, because Ron is one of the most supportive people he's in the Toronto area, and I wish he was in Vancouver, or we'd be doing a lot more together. But Ron
For
is
sure,
so
yeah.
supportive of everybody in Age Well, and he's been one of the advocates for Age Well, and one of the patient advocates, and he's been like a driving force to bring Age Well into the community and make it really useful and helpful to seniors. So I want to again do that shout out formally and thank Ron Bellino so much for everything he's done for Age Well. Okay, thanks, Ron.
Yeah, great. So we have a question, I think, Louise, I think you're answering some of these via text, which is great. Thank you for that. And it's another, we've got quite a few folks interested in dementia. And so I just want to say kind of broadly from an Age Well Network perspective, there are some other technologies that are kind of, dare I say, game adjacent, things like virtual gym, which looks at cognitive and physical health. There's a whack-a-mole game that also looks at cognitive health. So there are these other projects within Age Well that address some of these areas. So have a look, and we'll post some links in the chat for that. So the question is, are there any plans to create games that focus on left and right brains, especially for those with brain injuries or dementia? So I can tell you that there are ones looking at dementia specifically, but I'm not sure about brain injury, and Louise and David, you might have a better idea for those.
Yeah. Not really, you know, again, that's a whole different area, and we just wanted at this point to focus on, you know, what we would call, say, adults in the normal range. So we didn't look at that too much. However, I should mention that we did in the other project that we have in in WP4, which is WP 4.3, and that one I'm a part of as well, and that's led by Dr. Kaufman Montague in Toronto, and Karen Moffat at McGill. In that one, when we were offering digital storytelling workshops to older adults all over the greater Vancouver area, and these are like 10-week courses where people create typically about 5-minute video about some important event in their life, and then they share it with family and friends and all of that. So in that project, one of my master's students actually did a study of 6, her thesis is available if you'd like, and a paper as well, but she did a study of dementia with 6 older adults here, and that project was a collaborative one with Lily Liu in Alberta, and it was and with the folks in Toronto as well, and it was actually quite successful project. And the dementia, these were people with fairly mild dementia, so they weren't deep into it, but they needed a lot of help, and so we couldn't work with them in a course format with a group. It had to be done one-on-one with them, but we did support them and we did help them, and they really appreciated being able to tell the story, because as one person said, I'm so glad I was able to create my story now, because I know that in the future, as I get worse, I wouldn't be able to tell that story. So at least I've captured it for my family and friends now, which was very touching.
That's great. An easy technical one here. Can games play at, can games be played at different locations? So I think some of these cooperative games, like the escape room, where it's two folks. So if you have one person in Toronto, let's say, and another in Vancouver, that's possible, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. It's all done on the internet, and Louise's games can be accessed from anywhere, pretty much anywhere in the world. In fact, just to mention, with Louise's games particularly, we've translated them in different languages. For example, we've had them translated into Portuguese, because my Brazilian colleague that we're collaborating with is wanted them translated at the University of Santa Catarina in Florianopolis, and so she's been doing some research with the games in Portuguese actually over there. So the games, you know, really you can access them anywhere.
Perfect. And I think that's it. We've got, I think we've answered most of the questions, and I see a real interest in some of the questions about kind of promoting social connectedness online for not just healthy older adults, but also ones that might be living with early onset dementia or other conditions. So I think that might be something that we hold on to as perhaps a topic for a future webinar to explore that area specifically. I want to thank both of our presenters again, and all of you for participating, and folks for asking questions. It was a great conversation, and I'm glad we were able to have so much time to discuss. I want to remind folks to please complete our webinar evaluation survey. You'll get it emailed to you as well. And you're getting lots of thank yous in the chat, and fantastic presentations. So thanks again, David and Louise.
Thanks everybody. I'm so sorry. C'est dommage que les Français n'ont pas posé des questions en français, mais peut-être la prochaine fois. Merci d'être venu nous écouter. C'est très gentil.
Thank you for your participation and your excellent question.